Hello there guys. So welcome to a delayed video, but a video nevertheless. This is going to be on Waterdeep Dragon Heist. It's going to be a review of sorts. I apologise for the camera work here. I seem to have misplaced a tripod that I was using to record these videos with. But I wanted to talk about this module and about what I found with it so far, about running it. I think there are a lot of players out there who are running this adventure and either being disappointed with it or maybe would like some guidance on how I think running this adventure should go. First thing I want to say is that this adventure I think requires a lot of prep work. You are basically preparing an entire city. So I wanted to throw a quick shout out at the beginning of this video to talk about some recommended products that I think make this adventure easier to run. So guys, when running any kind of adventure like this, in which you have to prepare the entire city, you need to be prepared for a little bit of improvisations. And that is where I found these books to be incredibly helpful. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, I did not pick these up simply because I'm not a big fan of random roll charts, of which these books are essentially all of. However, they've become a really useful part of my game, simply because of the character names. You will be, players will go into a certain store and you need to just come up with a random name on the fly. Jotting down maybe 10 of these names onto a post-it note before the game is really, really useful. Same with magical items. And there are actually two books for the Table Fables by Madeline Hale. Both of which I think are really useful. The table of contents in them is different. There's enough in them to be useful. Different NPC generators and items and dungeon information. You can see right here there's, a lot of information. I think that for the purposes of this, for this module, I reckon that the first Table Fables book will do you absolute wonders and will be an essential part of your game. So that's my first recommendation. Next up, it's in the back of this module, but I've actually printed out a copy of my own, is Volo's Waterdeep Enchiridion. I probably pronounced that awfully, but oh well. So first things first, as a DM, this is going to be vital. You're going to need to read all of this and understand it, because this is the kind of thing that you're going to be explaining to your players. This could also be something you could hand to your players and allow them to read through as well, so they understand what sort of city they are exploring. It's a weird city, it's a big city, and it's one that I think doing your prep work with something like this is vital. Do not start running this campaign without first reading this. And as I said, this can be found in the back of this book. You can find this for free, I believe. It's Weekend in Waterdeep. So this is actually the printed out version of all of the notes for DMs when it comes to running this adventure. So what I mean by that is, for example, let's find a really good one here. Here we go. So this is about, I think it's part 2 of the adventure, when it comes to meeting the neighbours. This gives you all the notes when it comes to meeting them. You can see I've added a few things in there myself. But it also adds some details. Essentially what I've used this for is as my GM notes. So this is for running adventures. There's some encounters here for the Weekend in Waterdeep. I just think it's a pretty useful thing, and if you can find, I think you can find it for free. Actually, I think it is free. Then I highly recommend just printing off a copy. For example, over here it talks about the fireball and alley investigations, about how all of that works out. And it just summarises the entire book for you in a really easy way. So that is something I highly recommend picking up as well. And what you'll find is with these two together, you will actually have a fairly well planned out story going on, as long as you're okay with improvisations. And the last thing I recommend is not really essential, but it's the DM screen for Dragon Heist. The reason I recommend this product for running this adventure is simply because of all of the different tables. There are scenes that you can roll on behind the chart, which are going to tell you about, different encounters that they might have, or, just about little sort of immersive scenes that they can, for example, a drunk dwarf stumbles, falls down, picks himself back up. It adds a little bit of interesting sort of story dynamics to the game. It also has the code legal, which if your players break, they're not going to die in this adventure necessarily. They're more likely to end up in jail. So this is going to be really useful, so you understand the laws of the city. But then it has inns and boarding houses and places, which is so useful, as well as pickpocketed items and things. So this is a lot of information that is very useful to have on you when you are running an adventure like this. So my recommendation is that all these products, you give a look, at least have a look at them and consider purchasing if you are planning on running this adventure. So I know we're about 6 minutes in at this point. However, I do want to point out this is not an adventure that I recommend for first-time Dungeon Masters. The reason being, it requires a lot of planning because you are in a very detailed, very large city. But it also requires a lot of improvisation, which I know that a lot of new DMs are not comfortable with. So first things first, we're going to jump in to the story. Now, one of the biggest issues that I have with this story is that it gives you 4 incredible villains, and you've got to pick one of them. Now that is super irritating to me, and if you're like me and you're a fan of the DM's Guild, then you can find add-ons like this, which add new villains as well, and new encounters. This one adds a doppelganger villain to the game, called Hlavin, and the players have just defeated it in my game, and they've had a whale of a time. So it's, and it ties into the Undermountain story, because you can see there's actually a way into Skullport, which is on the 3rd layer of Undermountain, through Hlavin's shop. So not only are there, incredible additions to this game, but you also have 4 amazing villains that you have to pick between. And I don't like that at all, guys, because I'm a big fan of giving the best to the players, and if I see some 4 amazing characters like this, I want to throw them all at the players. So the first thing I recommend is not picking a villain and just including all of them. And again, this requires you to deviate from what is said in the book, but that's part of being a dungeon master. It's about taking what is said in the book and making your own story from it. The next thing I recommend, guys, is that a lot of this story, I think, can be simplified. So a lot of this story is... well, let me show you. It's probably easier just to tell you. So a lot of this story is all about this giant chase scene that happens when trying to find the Stone of Golor, which is essentially a key used to find this secret hidden vault. And that's a pretty simple concept to understand. However, it's not really explained very well in this book, in my opinion. And also, a lot of this book is separated into, when they get chased into the alleyway, and you'll actually see right here, there is a giant chase scene. Now, this is my issue with this, is that this is called Dragon Heist. I don't want a chase scene, I want a heist. And there are no heists in this book. But what they do give you is for all of these, so for Xanathar, for the Castellantas, for Jarlaxle, and for Mansoon, sorry. So a beholder, some cultists, a suave mercenary drow and an evil wizard, they give you their lairs, which is super interesting. So from their lairs, this is the one for Manchun, you can actually plan a heist using these. So my first recommendation to you is I highly recommend changing this adventure so that you include a few heist situations into it, because I think that is going to be a lot more interesting and to what the players expect than a chase scene. And by allowing the players to have these heists, they can essentially find these fantastic items and some brilliant loot in these areas. Also make enemies and make friends. That is probably my biggest recommendation when it comes to this book, is that scrap the chase scene and introduce a heist into this adventure. Now, I will say this adventure, Waterdeep Dragon Heist, does include a fantastic map. However, I find a lot of the map locations are incredibly difficult to plot out and to sort of put onto a table. The reason being is they're just so large. So a dry erase mat is going to be essential during an adventure like this if you want to use minis. Or you can go to the effort of actually making all of these different locations. Up to you, it's your call. So as I said before, I think that this adventure is... I think that it needs to be opened up. You're given 4 fantastic villains and you're told to pick one of them. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I think that you should get the choice to choose what villains you want to include into your game, and if you want to include more than one, I think that's a good call. In addition, there are also fantastic products such as Unseen Waterdeep. I think there's also the Beggar Prince and Blue Alley. I think some of the creative designers of this adventure have actually written a different start and an alternate. Basically, they've revamped this adventure more to what they imagined it to be. So there's loads of products out there that you can find on the DM's Guild that can be used to flesh out this adventure. And this is obviously a great adventure to add some homebrew elements into. One thing I do recommend is being very comfortable with improvisation. And if you're not comfortable with improvisation, then pick yourself up Table Fables, because that is a book that is going to come in incredibly handy to you. If you're not comfortable with coming up with names on the fly, or with items, or with different loot or potions, that kind of thing, then this book will come in very handy. I hope this video has been useful to some of you guys. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great day and happy adventuring.